everyone, welcome back to Courts This Week by Live Law. I'm your host, Debojit, and joining me as always is Advocate Ostika Das. This week was packed from electoral roll battles to the Diwali cracker ban. So, Ostika, let's start with the Supreme Court. There's been a lot of noise about the Diwali cracker ban. What can you tell us about that?
Basically, the Supreme Court has partially relaxed the ban this time. A bench led by Chief Justice B.R. Gavai lifted the blanket ban in Delhi NCR, allowing only green firecrackers, which are the ones approved by NEERI and PESO, to be used. Even then, people can burst them only in short windows, 6 to 7 a.m. and 8 to 10 p.m., both on Diwali day and the day before.
And what about the sale? Any checks to make sure it's actually just green crackers being sold?
Absolutely. Only licensed traders can sell them and only at designated spots. Online sales, including on platforms like Amazon and Flipkart, have been completely prohibited. Each cracker will also have a QR code so police can verify if it's genuine. The idea is to keep fake, polluting crackers out of the market.
But not everyone is happy, I'm assuming.
Some are apprehensive about the impact of this relaxation on the Delhi air quality and how the noise from crackers will take a toll on street animals, the elderly, and those with health issues. But others have welcomed this move, saying it allows them to fully celebrate Diwali.
Next, let's move on to the alleged irregularities in the Bengaluru's voter rolls. Ostika, can you please recap the story for us?
Yeah. This one's quite interesting. It all began after Rahul Gandhi publicly alleged vote chori in Bengaluru Central during the 2024 Lok Sabha elections. Following that, a petitioner named Rohit Pandey approached the Supreme Court claiming he'd independently verified massive irregularities, things like 40,000 fake voters, 10,000 duplicate entries, people with multiple voter IDs, and even 80 voters listed at one small address.
That sounds pretty serious. So, what was he asking the court to do here?
He wanted two things: a full audit of the voter rolls before finalization and a special investigation team to probe the alleged fraud. But the Supreme Court bench of Justices Suryakant and Joymalya Bagchi did not entertain the plea. They said he could approach the Election Commission first. When the petitioner said that the ECI had ignored his earlier representation, the court still didn't set a timeline, just told him to go back there for redress.
So, the courts basically stepped back, leaving the ECI as the only forum for now, which makes what the commission does next all the more crucial, especially with growing scrutiny over electoral transparency. Moving on to one of the biggest constitutional questions we're about to see play out: how election commissioners are appointed. Ostika, what's the issue here exactly?
So this is about the Chief Election Commissioner and Other Election Commissioners Act 2023. It basically changes who sits on the selection panel that picks election commissioners. Earlier, after the Arup Baranwal judgment in 2023, the Supreme Court said that the panel should have the Prime Minister, the Leader of the Opposition, and the Chief Justice of India. But Parliament later passed this law, removing the CJI and adding a Union Minister instead.
That sounds like a big shift in balance. What are the people worried about here exactly?
Petitioners say it tilts the scales in favor of the government. Replacing the Chief Justice with a minister gives the executive more control over who runs the Election Commission, which they argue undermines its independence. The court had made that earlier arrangement precisely to avoid this kind of influence, is what the petitioners are arguing.
So, what's the latest here?
This week, this case couldn't be taken up again, so the petitioner's lawyer, Prashant Bhushan, made a simple request to the bench, Justices Suryakant and Joymalya Bagchi, to give the matter 3-4 hours on any day for a full hearing. His concern is understandable. The law was passed back in 2023, and since then, questions over the election commissioner's independence have only grown louder. The bench has now finally fixed a firm hearing date, that is November 11th.
All right, what's next on the list here?
Another big one on elections. The Supreme Court heard the case on Bihar's voter list revision called the Special Intensive Revision or SIR. We've discussed this at great length in previous episodes. The matter has now been pushed to November 4th. Prashant Bhushan, appearing for the Association of Democratic Reforms, asked the court to direct the Election Commission to immediately publish the complete final voter list, including every addition, deletion, and the reasons behind each. He said it was urgent since the nomination dates for the Bihar Assembly polls start mid-October.
And how did the Election Commission respond?
Senior advocate Rakesh Dwivedi for the ECI said that the final list was already being published and rejected the claim that Muslims were disproportionately excluded. He pointed out that the ECI does not even record voters' religion and added that no appeals had been filed against deletions, even though free legal aid was already being offered in terms of the previous order of the Supreme Court.
So, what did the court decide this time?
The bench led by Justices Suryakant and Joymalya Bagchi said they had confidence in the ECI and gave it time to complete the publication. But the larger constitutional challenge to the SIR process is still alive, and that's what they'll take up on 4th November.
Next, from elections to Sahara and SEBI. What is happening there?
The long-running Sahara SEBI saga is active again. Sahara has proposed selling a portfolio of 88 properties, including the Ambi Valley Resort, to Adani Properties Private Limited. The aim is simple: raise funds to pay back investors. SEBI says roughly 9,000 crore is still outstanding from the court's 2012 order. Sahara, through senior advocate Kapil Sibal, claims the Adani purchase could fetch over 12,000 crores.
That's a massive sum. What about the court's approach?
The bench, led by Chief Justice B.R. Gawai, has asked the union government and SEBI to respond urgently. Because the properties have competing claims, the court appointed amicus curiae Shekhar Nafare to categorize the properties and sort claims out before any sale proceeds. The matter is going to be back before the court on November 17th, and it will be interesting to see how the deal progresses.
Next, we have to take a look at Sonam Wangchuk's NSA detention. Any progress there?
Yes and no. Some procedural and factual developments, of course. The Leh District Magistrate filed an affidavit saying Wangchuk was detained on 26 September on credible inputs that his activities were prejudicial to national security. The affidavit said Wangchuk had been informed of the grounds but hadn't actually informally challenged the order yet.
What about his conditions in custody?
The Jodhpur jail superintendent reported Wangchuk is medically fit, not in solitary confinement, and has been allowed to meet his wife, brother, and lawyer. Notably, the jail provided him a laptop to prepare legal notes, even though there is no prison rule requiring that. In court, Kapil Sibal argued Wangchuk should be allowed to share his defense notes with his wife. To which Solicitor General Tushar Mehta said he had no objection to sharing, but warned the delay in filing a challenge could be used later to attack the detention on procedural grounds.
And how did the court respond to all of this?
The court directed the union to allow sharing of the defense notes, but expressly reserved its view on the Solicitor General's concern about delay being weaponized. This matter will be listed again for further hearing.
Okay, let's move on to the next pivotal moment, custodial rights. Can you tell us a little about the petition that was filed this week?
Of course, this is potentially transformative. Petitioners asked the Supreme Court to elevate the right of an arrestee to have a lawyer present during police interrogation. Right now, Section 41D of CRPC, which is Section 38 of the BNSS, merely allows an arrestee to meet an advocate, which was pointed out to be inadequate and dangerous, which it is. They rightly want a lawyer's active presence during interrogation to prevent coercion and custodial abuse. And the petitioners came in prepared, referencing the 2019 National Campaign Against Torture report, which was used to highlight several brutal custodial deaths to show the prevalence of torture and coerced confessions. The petitioner lists tragic examples: a 17-year-old in Tamil Nadu, Hira Bajania in Gujarat, Karan Kumar in Punjab, and Nesar Ansari in Bihar, all of them tortured to death to extract confessions from them for minor cases of theft, forcing the argument that a lawyer's presence throughout the procedure is a key safeguard against such abuse.
That could shift police procedure nationwide if the court agrees.
Exactly.
Next up, a big political question from Telangana. This one's about the state's move to bring in 42% reservation for backward classes in the local body elections. So what's the dispute here?
So Telangana passed a law to raise backward classes reservation to 42%, but it ran into trouble. The state says it's valid because the bill got deemed assent from the governor. Basically, it became law even without her signature. But the petitioners argued it violates a 50% ceiling on total reservations set by earlier Supreme Court rulings like Krishnamurthy and Vikas Gawali, and the High Court agreed to grant an interim stay on the law. This is what the state government has challenged in the Supreme Court.
And what's the state's defense here?
Senior advocate Abhishek Manu Singhvi argued that the 50% cap isn't absolute. Telangana had solid data from a year-long socio-economic survey and had met the triple test laid down by the Supreme Court.
Remind us, what is this triple test?
So basically, it comprises 3 steps. The state must set up a commission to study backwardness in the local bodies, act on its recommendations, and keep total reservations under 50%.
That sounds convincing. So did the court actually buy it?
Not really. The bench wasn't persuaded, saying the 50% ceiling still holds. It refused to lift the High Court's stay on the law and told the High Court to decide the main case soon.
Next up, the Bar Council fee hike controversy. This one really set off a storm, didn't it?
Oh, absolutely. The Bar Council of India hiked the non-refundable nomination fee for state Bar Council elections from 9,000 rupees to a whopping 1,25,000 rupees. Lawyers argued this makes the process undemocratic, that only the rich can now afford to contest. Some even pointed out that councils like Delhi's already have huge reserves, around 99 crores, so the hike made little sense.
And how did the Supreme Court react?
Well, it didn't really step in. Justice Suryakant, half in jest, said, let them contest later. What's the tearing hurry? And even added, your supporters will take care of the amount. So the petitioners ended up withdrawing the plea. But the criticism remains that this decision risks turning Bar Council elections into something only the wealthy can participate in.
And finally, let's talk about the Rajasthan High Court's big order on the genetically modified food imports. This one could have huge public health implications, right?
Absolutely. The High Court, led by Acting Chief Justice Sanjeev Prakash Sharma and Justice Sanjeev Purohit, has imposed a complete ban on the manufacture, sale, and import of genetically modified or GM foods. The shocking part is that the court found for nearly 20 years the centre hasn't framed the rules it was supposed to under the Food Safety and Standards Act, even though GM food safety is a global concern.
That's a serious lapse. What did the court say about the government's conduct?
The judges called it astonishing that India has been relying on temporary abeyance notifications for 2 decades, basically kicking the can down the road, while food products without clear safety rules enter the market. The court said that this inaction violates the right to health under Article 21 and ordered the government and FSSAI to frame proper regulations within 6 months. It also directed that all imported foods must now carry a clear GM-free label.
So, a clear message from the court: regulate it properly or don't let it in at all.
That's right.
That's all for the episode of Courts this week. Remember to access every order, judgment, and development discussed here and more. Visit www.livelaw.in. And on behalf of all of Live Law, we wish you a very relaxing few days of holidays. This is Advocate Ostika Das. I'm Debujit. Thank you for watching.